Good evening. Welcome to this LPC Caucus town hall. I am joined tonight by a good friend of mine, fellow Nebraskan, Ben Backus. And we are sort of thinking that maybe Andy and Shawn will be joining us in a little while. We're in multiple time zones, so we'll see what happens with Andy and Shawn. But Ben, you're in. Where are you at? You're in your basement, maybe?
I'm in the bomb shelter on my house. My house came with a bomb shelter, and it's my man cave, so to say. I do my podcasting down here for Roads to Liberty, and anytime I do something online, it's down here.
Oh, very cool. And you were having problems with a cat a little while ago, right?
Yeah, my lighting is suboptimal right now. It's a little dark right here. For some reason, I have lights that go around the perimeter of the bomb shelter, and for some reason, they've quit. And I would almost guarantee it's cat related. Somebody messed with some wires down below.
Hard to believe. So I've got a couple of cats too, and you find all sorts of surprises that the cats leave behind one way or the other. So you are a city councilman in Gering, Nebraska. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been doing that.
Well, I was just reelected to another 4-year term. So I've done one 4-year term already. The way I got involved with it, it's kind of a long political journey. I started out as a Ron Paul sort of independent type person. Went to some local Republican meetings and realized that they weren't too fond of Ron Paul and the Liberty Movement. At that point, I found the Nebraska Libertarian Party, and I became involved there in 2013 or 14. I got involved with the party on this side of the state. There really wasn't a presence over here, so I just kind of kicked it off myself. Kind of if you see something that needs done, do it sort of person. So I started a branch out here, started working with the rest of the state, and I ran for Secretary of State to help maintain ballot access. And from there, I decided, well, it's going to sound like I'm pooping on national, but I started looking at getting involved with the national party. Must have been about 2016. And I thought it was a hot mess, and I didn't think it was worth my time to spend my energies there. So I redirected my time locally, started going to city council meetings. I went to every city council meeting for 4 years before I ran for city council. I ran for city council and I won.
Great. So, and you knocked on doors for me back in 2018, I believe.
I did.
And I have to tell everybody that Ben is probably the single most responsible person for me switching parties back in 2016. We were at a state convention, and you had invited me to come and speak at the state convention for the Libertarian Party, and and we were standing, as I recall it, we were standing in line waiting to put our sandwiches together for lunch. And you just kind of sidled up to me and said, Senator, if you ever decided to change parties, we'd welcome you. And is that about right?
You really took it and ran with it. I had no idea you would get so in depth with national. Maybe being in the state legislature, you had more. See, there went my light again. You have more appetite for some of the BS that was going on at that level. It wasn't for me, though. So my hat's off to you for getting that involved at national and doing what you do.
Well, I don't know if it's a good thing necessarily, but certainly, and there's Jared saying that Ben's probably the reason you're here as well. We have you and Jared and I have sort of an interesting kind of trifecta thing going on. I switched parties not a couple of weeks, probably a month after you made that comment to me, and I kind of laughed it off at first. I really didn't. Yeah, right. I'm gonna switch parties, and then I went to a Republican Party convention and got called out, and I just had it, and so I made the switch. And as I recall, you were in Orlando, right?
Yep, I was.
And I messaged you guys and said, okay, I've made the switch, and David Demarest announced it.
Yeah, got standing ovation for.
I wasn't even there.
there was a whole bunch of, there was some guys from New Hampshire too at that point.
Yep, they came in right after I did, I think.
And I think, did they get voted out too eventually, or they just?
Yeah, they at least, yeah, I think they both did. Both Caleb and well,
No,
there were three of them.
Were they targeted like you were?
They weren't targeted like I was. It's a different kind of a campaign, really, in New Hampshire, because they've got 400, House
Right.
members and a little itty bitty state.
I think I represent about as many people as a New Hampshire state legislature.
I think that's probably true. Yeah. Do you have a? Are you ward based?
Yeah, I was hoping Shawn was going to be here so we could talk about some differences in cities. My city is ward based, and we have a mayor administrator form of government. So your city council person is a lot more hands on than in a mayor manager form of government. Mm-hmm. See, in a form of that government, the mayor is usually appointed from the city council, whereas in my city, the mayor actually has to run for office. I pick on people that are in that form of government. They just meet 2 times a month and make sure the city manager is doing his job, and that's all they have to do. But if in a strong council form of government, we're on committees that run the public works, we run the police department, we set budgets for all that stuff. So it's a lot more hands-on.
So do you have like 3 or 4 or 5 different committees of your council that handle different
I have
things?
3 different committees, and this is the funny part. I'm on the public works, the public safety, and the admin committee. So I'm in charge of the roads. I get to be in charge of the roads and the police. So who builds the roads? Apparently, a Republican or a Libertarian on city council does.
That's pretty awesome. So Jared, I made mention of Jared here a little bit ago, and he left a message for us. Said you're the reason he's here as well. Do you remember that story? How we ended up with him?
With Jared Hall?
Yeah.
I just kind of Facebook stalked him, honestly. I was looking for somebody that was part of the. I didn't mention that I worked on the Gary Johnson campaign. Jared and I both worked very hard on it. Jared harder than me because there's more people on that side of the state. And man, I don't even remember how I stumbled across Jared's name. I think he had just registered as a libertarian or something, and I saw it on the rolls, and I kind of stalked him, and he seemed like somebody who'd be good in that position. I don't know, just divine providence, I guess, and reached out to him and asked him if he'd do it, and he got involved with the Gary Johnson campaign, and it went from there.
Yeah, I remember that he actually, you called me up, I think somewhere in that time frame, or messaged me and asked if I would be willing to meet with Jared just to do sort of a just to do sort of a once over. And so I had him. I got together with him actually in the Capitol. I was in Lincoln one day, and I said, "I want you to come on over to my office." And we had a little conversation, and he, the things that we started, huh?
Yeah, right.
Jared's amazing, but he left us for Indiana. So
doing great things out there too. He's a political director now.
I think so. I think he's still political director.
Yeah.
So tell me about what some of the exciting things are that are going on in Gering, Nebraska. First, tell us about the size of the community, what the demographics of the community are, and that sort of thing.
Gering's about 8,000 people. It's a little bit diverse. We're about 30% Hispanic, 70% white. Representation on city council doesn't show it, but it's kind of a weird dynamic here in that regards. I wouldn't say it's a bedroom community of Scottsbluff, but there's 2 cities directly across the river from each other, Scottsbluff and Gering. Scottsbluff's about 12,000 people. And you have a dichotomy there. In Scottsbluff, you have very high income and very low income living there. And Gering gets most of the middle class lives here. So it's a widely different situation between the 2 cities and what they're dealing with. Scottsbluff used to be very retail based, and as you know, retail is largely disappeared. Gering has always kind of just had random industrial things. Actually, the nice thing about retail disappearing in Scottsbluff is, Gering has gained the largest retailer in the world by Amazon. Our sales tax receipts are usually up 20% every couple months. So that's good for us. I mean, bad for Scottsbluff, but that's how it goes.
So, let's talk just a little bit because there's a lot of people. We hope the people that are watching this and they'll look at it again later. They want to run for local office, and they want to think about what kinds of things do they need to know when they're going to doors, and how should they campaign. I mean, I make the assumption that the best way to campaign for city council is to knock on people's doors. So why don't you talk a little bit about your first campaign and your second campaign, I guess, and then what kinds of things people are talking about at the doors when you go talk to them.
Yeah, I didn't mention that. It was my second time running that I won. The first time I just kind of hopped in with both feet, and I hadn't been to a lot of city council meetings, so I was kind of learning as I went. I touched every door in my ward though, and mostly it was I kind of had a long-term plan. I figured I wasn't going to win this one, but the first one I used it to gather information, find out what people were concerned about, what they thought about the current city councilman. You'd be surprised how many people just don't even really know who their city council person is, or even care about any issues for that matter. So I kind of formulated that and realized I was just going to have to be a visible name, so that when people, they might not know who their city councilman is, but when they went in there and they saw my name, they might think, oh, wait, I heard of that guy. So over the next 4 years, I started going to all the city council meetings. I would watch for issues that I could throw my opinion in on, an informed opinion, so I didn't look like a doofus when the news would report on, somebody commented from the peanut gallery. And it worked. I mean, I lost my first one by 43 votes.
Wow.
The second one, somebody fought, the incumbent met with me. He had seen me at all the city council meetings. He's like, you know what? I've been doing this for 20 years. I think you're the right guy to take my place. I'm not going to run again, and I'll tell people that they should vote for you. So I put my name in. Somebody else filed, and I used a little bit of strategy. I canvassed just right around his house because I knew he was new, so he'd probably, be a little scared. And the first houses he'd hit would be the ones right around where he lived. Canvassed around his house, put yard signs around his house. So, that first week he left to go door to door, and he saw a bunch of Ben Backus signs and talked to a couple people, and they're like, well, I like that Ben guy. And he actually ended up dropping out because he thought he was going to be facing an unclimbable hill. So I ended up sailing in unopposed the second time.
That's amazing. So our friend Jake Porter over in Iowa.
Jake, my Secretary of State buddy.
That's right. He points out that you do a lot of great work. So
thank you, Jake.
And yeah, go ahead.
Well, and people think you're going to get on city council and light the world on fire. I might be in a little bit better position where I have it's a strong council form of government. I can kind of lean on committees, but a form of government where you have a city manager, you're going to have a hard time. You're just kind of there to throw in your opinion when something is completely off the wall. I guess a couple of the things I did, I got chickens in backyards, body cams for cops. Something that I just thought was completely crazy was, and this came under public safety, was if we had somebody with tall grass and they needed to cut it, or they needed to shovel their yard, they'd send the cop to their door to deliver the notice. I was like, you don't send a cop. I mean, anytime a cop opens a door with somebody, it could be a life-changing event. So we changed that. So, any of the city employees, or I guess you would say they're deputized, they can leave a note on a door saying, hey, you got to cut your grass or shovel your snow. And those are probably some of the biggest things I've done. Everything else is just minutia of balancing budgets and and all that sort of thing.
Which is important, right?
Yeah, it is.
Balancing budgets. So let's talk. So you mentioned chickens, and we've got a good friend out in Kearney, who is sort of the chicken lady of Kearney. What were the rules in Gering before you got there in terms of chickens, and how did that change?
Well, it was kind of a weird situation. The city ordinance didn't say you, it was, I called it Schrodinger's chicken. It didn't say you could have chickens, and it didn't say you couldn't have chickens. So it kind of just came down to you could have a chicken until somebody complained about it, and then you had to get rid of your chickens. So when I first wanted to pass the ordinance, people were like, oh, he wants to get rid of all the chickens. And then the other people were like, oh, he wants everybody to have chickens. So I was kind of surprised it ended up passing. I just, if you're going to have an ordinance, if you do a lot of the legwork yourself and come up with the language ahead of time and don't expect somebody to do it for you, that's probably some good information for a new city council person. You'll go a lot further. And you'll find with a lot of these ordinances, it's like one person got a good idea for it a while ago, and everybody just kind of cut and pastes it and trims it up to meet their own needs. So I had this ordinance, I got it. I kind of had a little strategy on it. I made it a little more lenient than I wanted. And so when it came to committee, I was like, oh, all right, well, I'll take out this part. And so then it looked like I was being reasonable, and it just kind of sailed through committee and got approved.
That may be a trick for libertarians who are on city councils or otherwise to employ, ask for more than you really want, or ask for everything that you want at least.
That is
and
the
then
strategy.
Be reasonable. Yeah, and then be
with
reasonable.
A lot of things.
Yeah.
If you're going to bring something to a board or whatnot, I mean, shoot a little higher than you think you will. And then when it comes to the discussion time, if you trim it down a little bit, everybody thinks you're being very reasonable and flexible.
Yeah. Here in Crete, we've had discussions about this. I've got a big backyard. Of course, it's in a neighborhood where they probably aren't going to appreciate chickens all that much, but I'd love to have a few. But Crete has this crazy, you can't have any livestock. So I had somebody while I was in the legislature who wanted to have a pot-bellied pig that lived inside most of the time. That was an emotional support animal, right? And the mayor would not let her have it because the ordinance says no right. Livestock. You go to Lincoln, and their law is that you can have their ordinance is that you can have up to 4 laying hens, but just no roosters. So I mean, it's crazy how you got to Lincoln, where you have 250,000 people, and in Crete, where you've got 7,500, you get such a disparity there.
Well, and I don't understand. This is just one of those basic things that I think every libertarian that gets on city council should try and get it passed. And I understand why so many people are against it. I haven't had one negative opinion come at me from it, but I actually had somebody who moved here, and they contacted City Hall and wanted to find out who was responsible for the chicken ordinance. And they told him, well, Ben Backus, he's on city council. This person emailed me thanking me for passing it. The only reason they moved back was because they had wanted a small town in the area that allowed chickens, because she had chickens when she was younger. I think she was like 50 and retiring early. So here's somebody who came to Gering, bought a house, paying taxes every year, just because they wanted to have chickens in their yard.
And then Jared tells us that he had 4 chickens in Lincoln and wasn't allowed.
I've got 4. They're not. I mean, when chickens lay eggs, they squawk a bit, but it's nothing compared to the neighborhood dogs.
Right.
They don't stink. They keep bugs down. I haven't had a negative with it. I mean, they try and, aside from I had no idea chickens had such attitudes. Aside from, I mean, they follow me everywhere, and if I leave my plate out, they steal my food. But I haven't found any negatives with them.
So Jared says that before this is over, we need to hear Ben's quote about what people want.
My governing policy for city council is people want to be able to drive home safely to poop. And if you cover all that stuff, anything outside of that is just extra. And to break it down a little bit, I've done this before. They want to be able to drive home safely. They want their roads to be in good condition. I know libertarians hate roads, but people want to be able to drive on their roads. They want to do it safely. They want to feel safe when they're at their house. They want to know when they're leaving for work for the day, their house isn't getting robbed. They want to be able to poop. They want their toilets to flush. They want their water to run, and they want their lights to be on. That covers everybody's basic needs for a city. And if you meet all those, you probably won't have any issues.
That raises an interesting point, though, because in some ways it's very philosophically, that sounds very contrary. Okay, city government has some responsibilities there. That's very contrary to kind of the certainly the anarchist view of libertarianism, right? I mean,
well, your amount of libertarian governorship should scale upwards the higher in government you go. Your most libertarian form of government needs to be at that top federal level. I mean, I'd love to have an anarchist congressman. I probably wouldn't want an anarchist mayor. And the reason being, your lower level government is so much more accessible. Let's take the police, for example. The police are controlled by city council. People always complain about the police. Well, get better city council people that will hold your police responsible. They set the city council sets the training budgets. They hire the police chief. Maybe in some other forms of government, the city manager does it. But that's your problems right there. Police chief, budget, training. So, and the anarchists, anytime I say, well, I'm not for defunding the police on the city, they're like, oh, well, why are you so for the state? Well, what's your solution? They're like, well, they could have a private police force. It's just the same thing with extra steps to me.
right.
And probably a lot of libertarians will hate that. But that's how I've found it to work. Your closest form of government is the most easily to control.
In some ways, we'd be better off to have a whole lot more small communities, where 7,000 or 8,000 members are the big communities, as opposed to having, these big metroplexes that are much more likely to be distant from
well, you got to
governing.
You got to look at how, and I don't know why, if it's from living in a city or cities attract that type of person that likes a centralized, powerful form of government. In a large city, it seems like you would do better by breaking it down, break down the management structure of the city instead of having it so centralized. You have neighborhoods that would all be run different, but it's all run by one overbearing central city government. It's like City Omaha has how many city council people?
I don't know.
Probably like
10?
eight or 10.
Yeah.
You got the same amount of people managing Omaha as you do managing Gering. And they're just people like me. It's not like they're a bunch of rocket scientists and master's degrees.
Which may not be the best people to be running city government.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
Jake has a question. He says, do they appoint a civilian police oversight board in your city?
No, and I think it would be an extra step again. I mean, the civilian police oversight board is me and the 4 other city council members that are on the public safety committee. We just haven't found a need for it, I guess. Then again, probably in the bigger cities, they maybe do need that, since it's apparent that the mayor and the city council can't run the police force.
Well, yeah, and in some ways, if you've got a subcommittee of or a committee of your council, that's sort of your oversight board, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a separate. Small towns, it's hard to get separate people to come. Other people to come in and volunteer their time to, do some of those administrative things.
Yeah, like library boards and tree boards. All your boards are mostly volunteers. I still find it amazing that a lot of school boards are volunteer. They seem to put in a lot of time. But yeah, that's the thing. I just think it'd be an extra step. Indy has 9 townships with their own boards. See, I think that's probably the way to go. I'm not sure how effective Indianapolis's city government is. I don't hear a lot of complaints about Indianapolis online. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I just don't go to the right places.
You're in Western Nebraska. Why would
Yeah.
So Dominic has a question. He says his name's Dominic. He's running for city council as a 21-year-old. I've asked this question before on a different episode with 2 other elected officials. My question to you is, what advice do you give a young candidate like himself who's running against a 60-year-old Democrat incumbent?
He needs to go to every city council meeting between now and whenever he's running. I mean, you've got to know those issues as good as that incumbent does. I'm not sure. Maybe he can say the size of his town, but I ran against let's see, I think he was on for 23 years. Speak up at the city council meetings, maybe meet with that incumbent and find out, why is he hanging in there so long?
9,000 people. So about the size of Gering.
I think he got a good chance. I mean, people, 21 isn't too young that people are just like, well, I need some seasoning on him. I would just start going to every city council meeting, sit down with that your opponent. He's a person. He'll talk to you.
Well, and the other possibility, of course, is in the interim, see what positions might be open on volunteer boards. Planning commissions and some of the library board and things like that.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that when I ran the first time. I lost, but they did appoint me to the 911 advisory board, and I've been on there ever since. I've been on that board for 8 years now. I'm the chair this year, so that's been nerve-wracking.
You find, I think, in smaller towns especially, that the number of people who are willing to, give of their time to sit on some of these things is pretty low. And so even if you aren't elected to something, you can get yourself more familiar with what's going on by getting appointed.
I'd guarantee there's some board that they could use you on. And if you go to city council meetings and, you start introducing yourself, you maybe provide some educated input, I would almost guarantee you'll end up on a board. And that's kind of a foot in the door to get going.
That's something that a lot of people, and I think libertarians maybe don't recognize this as much because we have a fairly small core of people who have gotten elected. It's increasing, but they don't realize the importance of kind of making those local connections.
Mm-hmm.
And being seen by at least a small group of people on other boards or or in your community as somebody who can be responsible.
Well, yeah, in a small town, there's kind of a small group of people that keeps informed on everything. And those people have friends, and their friends know they're the informed ones. So when it comes time to vote, they're like, hey, what do you think about the upcoming election? Who would you vote for? And if he's like, oh, well, I like Dominic, he'll be able to sell you to his friends. It's just getting noticed, and that small group of people that know what's going on will help it steamroll from there.
Absolutely. Well, I'm waiting to see if we've got any other questions. What else is going on? Do you guys have any exciting things going on in Gering right now? Weather's turning.
Yeah, the tornado alert. But maybe that's part of. Before I got on council, there was a lot of exciting things going on. Building ballparks,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very vocal against all that stuff. So I don't know. I don't want to claim I put the kibosh to it, but since I've been on, we haven't built any frivolous things such as that.
And how has that been? How has that been received by citizens? They reelected you, obviously, but what do people think? Do you have people mad at you? Or
sometimes they're like, "Oh, why are you against all this stuff?" And when I just have to talk about all the things that need done, and we're building a $4 million ballpark. There's all sorts of roads that need fixed. Infrastructure's everywhere is aging. You just have to be able to sell your position. It's easy to get people to get behind a ballpark. especially the people that aren't up on the needs of the city.
It's for the
Because
kids.
yeah, it's for the kids. Everything's that's the one they throw out there. You got to have stuff for the kids.
Do you have a new swimming pool?
No, they're trying. I mean, I've shot that idea down a couple times.
We've got in my what was my legislative district, I think there's 5 or 6 new swimming pools, including in towns that have populations of 1,200. They built these new swimming pools, which I guess is great. But if you're if you're like in most of those small towns, have an aging population and a relatively small number of kids, so it's hard to see where that's going to be worth it 10 years from now,
Yeah.
once the current kids have moved on. And I don't think people move to a town because of its swimming pool.
No. Well, and they also want a new library. That's been about a 4-year fight, and I think I finally got them wore down enough. They're just like, fine, we'll just remodel the old one.
You can tell Dominic is new. A new libertarian. Yes, Dominic, I have run for political office. I was on my local school board for 3 terms, and I was in the Nebraska legislature for 1 term. So I've been around the block a few times.
Well, what about his second part? Do you have any inclination to run?
No, not really. I mean, I've had people ask me about it. I did recently. We had an opening on our city council, and I offered myself up. I had several people ask me to serve, but the mayor, who happens to be my next door neighbor, apparently selected somebody new. Somebody else. I haven't heard anything anyhow.
Oh, so. It was an appointment.
It was an appointment, yeah, and that's okay. I've got enough things on my plate. I really didn't need something else, and so yeah. Well, good for you, Dominic. We're glad that you're a libertarian and that you joined us. I joined in 2016, so you're just a few years behind me here. So, let's see what else.
I guess I could talk. I mean, since I'm not working on parks and stuff, I mean, some of the things I'm wanting them to work on is, back to that original drive home safely comment. The infrastructure. Boy, and something all the towns are really struggling with is housing, all the small towns. And, the libertarian free market answer is, well, the free market will provide. But for towns like mine, where we're an hour away from Cheyenne, which is, I think Cheyenne's almost 200,000 people now, and we're 3 hours away from Denver. Everybody knows Denver. Why would a developer build a house in Gering when he could spend the same amount of money building a house in Denver and sell it for 4 times as much? Right. And how do you bring the free market into that? It's hard to bring a libertarian free market solution in to something when the government handed solution has screwed everything up.
Right.
Everything's been so tilted to boosting the prices up in a large city. How's a small town supposed to? People want to move here. There's just no houses.
We've had the same problem here in Crete. I mean, housing, the housing market has gone crazy. I mean, things don't even stay on the market for very long. And they're the prices. I don't know what the prices of houses are like in Gering, but here in Crete, they're about twice what their assessed value is right now. Yeah,
and for a city, I think it was a couple weeks ago, for a city of 8,000 to only have 50 houses on the market. I mean, that's just insane. And that's 50 total houses. That's not in one range or not. So, I mean, one of the things that smaller cities have looked at is a lot of these old rundown houses that nobody wants to live in. You just buy them and take it in the pants to fix it up and sell it to somebody. Right. But you got to look at the product a city is selling is that chunk of land. They're selling that little chunk of land in their borders to citizens so they can get a return on, the utilities and the taxes every month and the sales tax and that personal spend while they're there. So it's not just, and people are going to roast me for this, I'm sure. It's not just throwing money away as a city, buying a house and fixing it up and selling it. You're going to get a return on that investment. You kind of have to look at, when you're on city council, you're the CEO of the company or the board, and the product is selling the city. If you can't get over that, you're probably going to have a hard time.
Yeah. So sure, somebody buys that little piece of property, and they're going to pay property taxes, and they're going to buy things in town, and so you're going to get sales tax income out of them, and they're going to add to the economy.
Well, and you might say, well, if it was worth anything, a developer would buy it and fix it up.
Yeah.
Well, he's not going to make enough money on it. The city is looking at the long-term,
right,
and recurring revenue. And if you're involved in business, recurring revenue is always better than an upfront cost. So that developer might buy it and say he spends $50,000 fixing it up, and it's only worth, and he paid $20,000 for it, and it's only worth $80,000. Why would he do it? But the city spends that, and they only make a little bit of money on it, but then they get that recurring every month.
Yeah. So let's talk about, we've touched on this already, but the larger infrastructure issues. I mean, and it gets back to, being able to, drive on good roads to go home and poop, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so when you start talking about sewer and water and roads and things like that, how would the free market handle those things? I have a hard time.
Well, I don't have a problem with people that want to live in a place where they don't pay for. I mean, that's what living out in the country's for.
Right.
I mean,
but if you're going to live in a community, you almost have to have some sort of cooperation, mutual, some sort of plan.
Yeah, that dreaded social contract.
Yeah.
That unsigned social contract that you get when you move into a community. If you don't like paying for roads and all that extra stuff, just move out into the country or something, or move into one of these little tiny podunk towns that's just kind of withering away. I mean, they'd love to have you there.
Yeah.
There's nobody to enforce the ordinances, so you can probably do whatever you want.
Have as many chickens as you want.
Yeah, you can have as many chickens as you want, because there's not a single cop on the payroll to give you an ordinance violation. There's always options.
Yeah, but I mean, for sure you can. I mean, if you can go out and drill your own well and dig your, create your own septic system, or
Right.
Whatever, that's different than if you're living in, you aren't going to have all of these septic systems in Crete, Nebraska, or in Gering, Nebraska, or any place like that in everybody's backyard. It'd be a mess.
Well, and they might be like, well, you're a libertarian. Why are you living in town then? Well, because I've got other things I'd rather do than deal with grading my driveway or dealing with the septic system. So I'm living here and I'm paying that premium because somebody else deals with it for me.
Right.
And I have a friend who lives out in the country, and he deals with all that. That's his choice. If he wants to spend his free time doing that stuff, that's fine. I'd just rather not deal with it.
Right. So really, it still is a libertarian solution. You just you're just letting somebody else handle it.
Yeah, but I guess you could say, well, I mean, you could have the free market solution, live out in the country and pay somebody to do all that. But
yeah,
when you're down at the community level, a lot of that stuff, to me, it's just the same thing with extra steps.
right.
If you go for private.
So let me see if there's any other questions. I see none that are new here. I think we've covered most of them. My cat's making a racket. What?
Yeah, the cat.
You hear my cat?
Yeah.
She's decided to make a racket. We've got old cats at our house, and every once in a while they'll just kind of wake up making a terrible racket, and they're weird. So we've all got cat problems, I guess. So anyhow, I don't have a whole lot more for you tonight. Ben, I appreciate your coming on, and I appreciate those who joined us tonight. Sometime we'll get Shawn on, and it looks like Andy had some car problems, and he's on the side of the road. So I'm glad that we were able to get together and talk a little bit. We don't get a chance to very often. Probably next year at the convention, huh?
Yeah.
The Nebraska convention, we'll get a chance to sit down and talk again. But
planning will start for that here shortly.
Are you in charge?
Maybe. I think Amy, I don't know. Either myself or Amy will do it.
The Nebraska LP, so far anyhow, we've managed to work really well together, I think.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with these other state. I just don't know the dynamic. You have all these people like, these new guys are taking over, and I don't know. I don't even know why they're taking over. I mean, it's their free time, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like Nebraska has enough groundwork. If you get a bunch of guys that say they want to do it, people be like,
Okay.
go for it.
Yeah. Well, I think I think that at some level there's something to be said for a change in a change in the changing of the guard from time to time, or at least a partial changing of the guard.
Right.
And as long as everybody is just okay, go for it and let us know if you need some help. I think that's fine.
Yeah, it sounded like a lot of these other states had like the same 4 or 5 people sitting on their board for a decade or so. Yeah. And ours has, I mean, we have enough talent, and it must be just Nebraskans willing to work together that, I mean, we've rotated. I don't think there's anybody on there was there 6 years ago even.
I don't think any of them, well, except for, is Gene still on? Gene, I think he's off the board, or he might be the second district coordinator. He was treasurer for years, but I do think that we have, a lot of them have come in since I've become part of the party. So that's very cool.
Yep.
And I think the last time I checked that Nebraska's up to over 18,000 registered voters.
Wow. Yeah, I don't even watch that stuff anymore.
I had been looking at it because watching the growth. You know, when I came into the party in 2016, we were just over 7,000, I think. So we've continued to grow, and
almost got enough that they'll have to address us on statewide issues, but
they might. See. Yeah, they might. But we'll see.
Pretty good. They're pretty good at ignoring us.
Well, one of the disadvantages of having of having a one-party system in the state, really, in most of the state, they don't really have to pay much attention to us if they don't want to. And the Democrats, actually, I found when I was in the legislature and after I'd made the switch, that was the Democrats who, were courting me for more attention, I mean, and to help, what can we do to get you on board? So.
Well, Nebraska is a Dillon's rule state. So what the state tells the cities we have to do it.
Right.
Like people have complained to me about, we adopted the International Building Code, which if I had an option, I would have never done that. But the state said, this is the state's building code, so do it, cities.
Yeah, the building code thing is pretty crazy. I think there must have been some new code stuff just passed in the not too distant, maybe last year, with respect to plumbing codes, because we got a thing in the mail the other day that said that if we still wanted to keep our service to our house, that we needed to fill out this form, and let them know whether we had the right.
That survey.
The survey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shut off.
That was an international building code thing.
Yeah. So I handed it to my husband and I said, please fill this out so that we can continue to get water and flush the toilet, and he filled it out.
Well, that's it. That, like I said, when you have the government screwing and stuff, it's hard to compete. Like, so a builder in Gering has to follow the exact same building code as somebody in Denver. And there's a lot of extra BS in there that would never apply to our area.
So here's the libertarian in me back a few years ago, I guess maybe while I was still in the legislature. I guess I can say that now. But we have 2 water heaters in our house, and one of our water heaters, they're electric water heaters. That's important to know. They're electric water heaters. And one of our water heaters went out. And so I called up the plumbers who had built our house, 15 years ago. And I said, hey, can you put a new water heater in for us? And they said, no, we can't, because Crete has adopted the same plumbing standards as Lincoln. And in order to put in a water heater, you have to have a master plumber there. It's like, okay. And I said, well, it's an electric water heater. Yeah, it didn't seem like it should be that big of a deal for an electric water heater. I could get it for gas, right?
Yeah.
And so I called down to the building inspector, and I said, "So who are the master plumbers in Crete?" And he gave me the list. Of course, it was in the middle of the summer, and these guys are all primarily do the lawn maintenance, the lawn sprinklers and stuff like that. They really aren't into the house stuff, but they've got the master plumbers. So my husband and I talked about it. He went down to Ace Hardware, ordered a hot water heater, and installed it himself.
Oh, you rebel.
Yeah, I know, it's really crazy, isn't it? But but the crazy thing about it is that we didn't. So we didn't get permits. We didn't get and I probably shouldn't say that.
Well, here's the stupid thing about that International Building Code is there's all sorts of stuff for plumbing that you're not supposed to be able to do as a homeowner, but they let you do some electrical wiring. So you can burn your house down, just don't fill it with poop.
Yeah, there's a great article from back in the 80s when a lot of this occupational licensing stuff started getting stricter, and it actually showed that people were more at risk of having electrical fires after they made the standards for electricians and electrical licensing stricter. Because what it did was it kept people out of the occupation. And so you had a lot more do-it-yourself stuff. And it was the do-it-yourself homeowner stuff that ended up burning their houses down.
Yeah. So that, like I said, it filters. It seems like it starts at the national level and then the state level. And by the time we're down here, we just had so much piled onto us.
Right.
That you don't have a lot of leeway to do stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, hey, Ben, I appreciate you joining me tonight. And there's a little thing screening along the bottom. We will regularly have events like this with other office holders, and we'll have other things coming up. So if you want to see what the caucus is doing next, you can go to our events page. And I echo Dominic, who says thanks, Ben. And
you're welcome, Dominic.
And we will see y'all probably in a couple of weeks for another show. So thanks, everybody.
Great. Thanks,
Ben.